Do you know what pain is? Did you ever agree to go out on a date with a girl and then wait for her all night to show up, but she never did? Well, that night never ended for Payne 96. As of the time of me making this video, he's been actively waiting on volcanic support for 840 days, and yet it never showed up. Unless you count that wet fart of a winged dragon of raw support that we got back in September of 2020. And if you call that a volcanic support card, then I'm sorry, but you're objectively wrong. That card is as much of a volcanic support card as, I don't know, DD Savant Kepler. Actually no, scratch that. DD Savant Kepler can actually support volcanics, I bet. Check this out. Okay, never mind. It's still work in progress. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Thundernumel and I welcome you to my channel. So while Payne and a few of us volcanic fans are waiting for the support to arrive, I thought I'd share my love for the deck with you and give you what I believe is the cheapest and the most interesting way to play volcanics. As this isn't your run-of-the-mill combo deck, I will give you my insight into every card and what that card can provide to you during a duel. But quickly before we get into that, if you enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh, please click like and subscribe to the channel, because each like will lower the day of waiting for good pyro/volcanic support to arrive in TCG/OCG by one. In an era of Yu-Gi-Oh where a deck is considered rogue if it puts up 2 negates instead of 5 or doesn't go plus 10 each turn for no reason, you'd be pleasantly surprised to see any of the older archetypes perform well. Especially a Fire Pyro archetype, which is one of the least represented monster type/attribute combos in the game. Volcanics is a deck that requires no extensive combo learning, but it does require a lot of thinking and planning ahead. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the archetype, I'll give a brief overview of the game plan. You're supposed to stop your opponents by locking them out of special summoning by using Barrier Statue of Inferno and protecting said statue with your control effects. You will stop their pressure by nuking their field with Volcanic Scattershot and also deal some chip damage, while accruing advantage with your numerous Pot of Greed effects, such as Volcanic Shell, Blaze Accelerator and Royal Firestorm Guards, just to name a few, thus slowly winning the game due to residual burn and small direct attacks. This deck differs greatly from Barrier Statue stun decks, as it won't allow you to have access to your statue at all times, and you will have to use clever strategizing to come out on top. A classic volcanic gameplay executed well looks something like this. With all that out of the way, let's get into the card by card. The first card we'll be taking a look at today is Accelerator Reload. If you're unfamiliar with the deck, you might be wondering why I'm talking about the trap card in the beginning of a video, but as you will soon find out, most of the deck revolves around it. Accelerator Reload is the linchpin of the deck, and it's the best Volcanic support card by a factor of 1,000,000. It's searchable by Volcanic Rocket, threatens a board wipe if face up on the field, and guarantees it if it's in the graveyard and scatter shots are in your deck or your hand. It gives you a discard/draw every turn, and if you discard shell, you can replace that shell with another shell, which is another free discard. Since it's a trap card, its graveyard effect is a spell speed 2 effect, meaning you can nuke your opponent's board at any time, ruining their combo or just protecting your board. Don't think of it just as a quick nuke, as it can also send Volcanic Shell from your deck to the graveyard, giving you a free monster in the hand that you could also use as link material. If none of this made sense to you, don't worry about it, just watch until the end and you'll soon enough understand the greatness of Volcanics. First monster we'll be taking a look at is Volcanic Rocket. Volcanic Rocket is one of the 3 good Volcanic monsters. It's a Stratos for your deck, and it allows you easy access to your best advantage generator/interruption in the deck. In a pure variant like this, you should never run less than 3. The fact that it has 1900 attack points is extremely relevant in this deck, which is a phrase you don't hear often nowadays. Volcanic Scattershot is your best disruption card. You use it as a quick play Raigeki that also inflicts 1500 points of burn damage. It's worth noting that it puts 3 Pyro-type monsters in your graveyard, which is important as it enables your other playmakers. No Volcanic deck should ever be made without 3 scatters. Volcanic Shell is a weird card. A very weak body with no good stats to speak of, and an effect that can be only activated while it's in the graveyard, and at the cost of 500 life points. This card is deceptively strong, however, because as you may have noticed, it does not have a once per turn clause, meaning that if you can get multiples of them in your graveyard, you can get insane advantage just like that. Think of it as one of your archetypal Pot of Greeds. The best way I could describe it would be a Thunder Dragon in Goat, but it also draws you a card on top of searching itself. An honorary Volcanic card. Royal Firestorm Guard is a Pot of Greed. Simple as that, while also putting your Scattershot and shells back into your deck to give you extra Raigekis, burn damage and advantage. Let's say you're a few turns into the game, and you will be with this deck, and you have 3 shells, 3 Scattershots and a Accelerator Reload in your graveyard. At this stage of the game, summoning a Royal Firestorm Guard will not only give you a Pot of Greed on a 1700 attack beater, but also a quick effect field nuke and a +1 Volcanic Shell to your hand, that you can possibly discard with your Accelerator on the field to draw another card, and add yet another shell. I can already hear you guys telling me that that's way too optimistic, but I promise you, play the deck and you will be amazed at how often it comes up. Some important stuff to take note of is that it triggers only on normal summon, and that the effect activates even if you have no valid target in the graveyard. Okay. I can already imagine you guys giving up on me at this point, but please hold your pitchforks and hear me out for a second. There are still no good Pyro monsters in the game, and it's 2021, and freaking reptiles got more support than Pyros, not to mention that the deck is old and obviously needs a good equalizer. That equalizer comes in a form of Barrier Statue of Inferno in this deck. Your goal will be to gather as much advantage while protecting your statue, until you gather enough resources to push for the game. However, Volcanics aren't the best at protect the castle strategy, and that's absolutely fine. That's what will make the games you play with this deck interesting, and besides, if you lose your statue, you will still have other ways to interact with your opponent and stop their plays. This is the newest quote-unquote playable Pyro monster that we got, and it's fine, I guess. It's a DD Crow on legs, which is a decently good effect to have in your arsenal in certain matchups, not to mention that it can send shell from your deck to your graveyard if you don't already have access to it. And I suppose you could also just send Scattershot and burn for 500 damage to win in time if you're that kind of person. I don't recommend running more than one. Our hand trap lineup starts with Ash. It's generically decent hand trap that most of us have. Also, since you're playing a fire deck, you can recur it back with Sunlight Wolf, making even better use of it. I like it at 2, but if you can find space, you can run it at 3 at your leisure. Our hand trap lineup swiftly ends with double copy of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. The most crippling weakness of Volcanics is getting one of your scatter shots banished. If you lose one of them, you won't have your field nukes for the rest of the game, and it just makes it way harder to win from there on out. If your opponent is smart and decides to get your scatter shots out of rotation, you can counter their counter with a Ghost Bell. Also, in a pinch, it can be used to disrupt a good number of meta and rogue cards, thus warranting a main deck inclusion. If you can find a space for the third copy, you can run it, same as Ash. After all of this, you might be asking yourself, why is Payne asking for more support considering the deck is, while mediocre, quite playable? And the reason is simple. I've named every relevant pyro type monster in the game right now, unless you count the Kaiju Mami, the Bricky Daddy, and everyone's favorite way to return a banished scatter shot to the graveyard. Oh, and how could I forget the world's saddest Kalut? Well, I guess there's this. But if you're not into that sort of stuff, I'm hoping that you'd be impressed by the mighty roar of the Volcanics. Or I guess their mediocre sneeze. If not, the spells might entice you, so let's check them out. As you might have as well noticed, most of our main monsters are level 4 pyros, and in my opinion it would be a waste not running Ties of the Brethren in this deck. Even if you just draw into Ties plus a Firestorm guards, you still get access to your statue and your rocket, that gets you access to your reload, that draws you into more cards and possibly provides disruption, in case you have a scatter shot in hand. Also worth noting is that 1900 damage from rocket plus 1000 from the statue plus the 1700 from guards and 1500 from scattershot effects leaves your opponent at exact 1900 life points, which is just one normal summon rocket off of lethal. And I told you the stats were important, so you would normal summon your level 4, use Ties, nuke your opponent's board, summon another rocket to win the game in an ideal world. But it's Volcanics, so don't expect it to happen too often. Pot of Avarice is a pot of greed that gives you your playmakers back. It's a really good card to have, but running multiple copies can make your hands unnecessarily bricky at times, with all recycling you're already doing, and with the fact that your deck can't really set up Grave on the first turn. One copy is fine, but run more at your own risk. I know, it conflicts with Ties. If you activate Duality, you can't use Ties, and if you use Ties of the Brethren, you can't activate Duality on the same turn. But we are playing a deck that is as old as Prometheus, and we need consistency without paying an arm and a leg for a playset of Pot of Prosperity due to the law of equivalent exchange. You won't always see Ties of the Brethren, and if you don't, you'll love seeing Duality in your hand, as it can help you dig for more cards. And if you draw both, just make the Ties play for this turn and save Duality for the next one. In the worst case scenario, you can use it as discard fodder. I also imagine it's worth mentioning that it's an Ash bait, as it's probably the least important one of your Ashable cards. Just make sure to think about whether or not you plan to special summon during the turn you activate it. Oh look, another Pot of Greed. This card is a Pot of Greed on almost every turn following the first one, as you will most likely have a face-up continuous trap to use for its effect, and it doubles up as a setup play for your Accelerator. The reason we're not playing more than 2 is the fact that drawing multiples in your opening hand can really make or break your chances of winning. You usually want either a statue or Accelerator set up going first, backed by your hand traps and or traps, and if multiples of the cards in your hand are bricks like Magic Planter is on turn 1, it can be really hard stabilizing afterwards. A Saki one-off that can win you games by itself. It's an amazing card to play in any deck that can spare the extra deck slot, and since we are playing Volcanics, we have plenty room to share. Doing the Link Spider Link Kuribo Nightmare plays with Volcanics feels amazing, because you can just discard shells for nightmare effects to pop/spin cards and draw more of your own. But you can also replace the shells that you discarded for measly 500 life points, gaining another draw and another shell. Also, after you're done with dismantling your opponent's board, you can make Avramex to protect your barrier statue that you might summon afterwards. As you can see, we are only playing draw cards and cards that swarm the field. I'd say this spell lineup gets Pot of Greed stamp of approval. Late game in Volcanics really does feel like this. But what about the traps? Paleozoic Morella is basically another copy of Blaze Accelerator Reload. It sends it to where it needs to be and it comes back as a free body for a link play. Just make sure you don't have a barrier statue of Inferno in play when you attempt to summon it by using its graveyard effect. A continuous trap to stop your opponent's effects, also preventing them from beating over your barrier statue with a normal summon monster, and afterwards can be used as fodder for Magic Planter. It's just fantastic. An alternative to this would be Crackdown, as it does give you another body by stealing your opponent's monster, and you could use that monster to exceed or link with, but I honestly prefer Fiendish Chain due to the immediate effect negation, as there are more than few monsters that activate their effects upon normal summon. Paleozoic Dinomicious is bot removal that discards as a part of the effect, and I've already explained how discarding feels lovely in Volcanics. Sadly, it's our only out to Mystic Mine in this build, and I honestly, as much as I try, can't find a spot to fit in 2 more copies. If you can run 3 of these, the extra bodies might come in handy. That's it for the traps, guys. Let's get into the extra deck and see what Volcanics have to offer. Playing an older deck like this means that you will occasionally brick. Normal summon Shell, link into Linkuriboh, add another Shell, and setting a few back row is a sad reality for this deck. At least Linkuriboh can soak up some damage and come back from the graveyard to further link plays, and it is also essential for the scapegoat play. Link Spider is mostly here for the scapegoat play, but it has other uses. You can use an Nibiru token Okay, I'm kidding, you very rarely summon more than 5 times in Volcanics. But as I was saying, you can use a paleo that you have to make a downward pointing arrow for your nightmares to use their co-linked effect and get you new cards to the hand and needed ones to the graveyard. I'll talk about Nightmare Phoenix and Cerberus at the same time, as they are very similar in the roles they perform in the deck. You discard your shells or blaze accelerators to pop a monster or a spell/trap while setting up the graveyard. They'll be co-linked more often than not, netting you extra draws. Also, having them co-linked to each other in a simplified game state can really give you some breathing room. Phoenix is the more useful of the two, as it's a fire monster, thus allowing you to make it while under a fire barrier statue and or allowing you to link into a sunlight wolf with it. We only run one wolf and it has its uses. Firstly, we can summon it under the statue, which is great, and it allows us to recur resources like Ash Blossom, Firestorm Guards, or even the barrier statue, to further choke our opponent out. You can proc his recovery effect by normal summoning to his zone, summoning a paleo under it, or simply linking your shell or a paleo into a respective link 1 under your wolf. We are not using the other effect at all, as it would require us to run Salamangreat cards, and as much as I'd love to, they don't do much for us. Probably the most interesting of our Link 2s. Having extensively played this deck, I can guarantee you that the most common targets for Hita's first effect will be as follow. Number 1, Ash Blossom. Number 2, Nightmare Phoenix. Number 3, Invoked Purgatrio. Ash is a very commonly played hand trap, and with how many draw, sand and search effects we are running, we are very likely to get hit by one. Nightmare Phoenix is another very common one, as you are locking your opponent out of summoning anything but fire monsters, and are more often than not setting more than one back row, which will get your opponent tempted to destroy them. If you special summon an Ash using Hita's effect, you can either link it with Hita to go into a unicorn, or use it as a tuner to make one of your level 7 synchros. Same thing that applied to other nightmares applies to this one, but it might be a little bit harder to get co-linked. Salamangreat Heat Leo is very similar to Unicorn in this deck, however it can be special summoned under the barrier statue. If you are planning to remove back row with your Link 3, you should consider going into this one and saving Unicorn for later. You rarely go into Link 4 monsters because your deck is very slow and grindy, but in a simplified game state, a well-summoned Borreload can solidify you in a winning position. Same thing that was said for Borreload applies here. However, it's easier to summon and it can protect your barrier statue. I guess it's worth mentioning for anyone curious that if you have a Volcanic Doomfire and an Avramex on your side of the board, at the same time, Doomfire's effect overrides Avramex's and the opponent is still forced to attack Doomfire. I was hoping the ruling would be that they can't attack or that they have to get locked into the battle phase or something cool like that, but I guess it wasn't meant to be this time. Emerald is probably the least flexible of RXC's monsters, as it can provide some good cycling utility if you for some reason can't get to your guards or Avarice. Honestly, you could include any monsters you like here. I just put Baguska for additional storing and Exciton Knight for blowouts. Any of the generic ones fit in here, or if you have AA Zeus, you can throw that in as well for good measure. Another one worth noting is Dugares, as it can be summoned under the barrier statue for damage push, more digging, or just reviving a statue or another one of your monsters. This one isn't a fire monster, but it does protect your statue. I've summoned him after stealing an ash from my opponent's graveyard and summoning an Inferno statue afterwards, and it's a very safe way to victory from there. You could also use your own hand traps as tuners if the situation calls for it. In all honesty, you can decide what to do with this one on your own. It can be summoned under statue, you can draw 2 cards with his effect, which is fine, but you already have more than enough ways to do that just by playing normally. And his Spell Speed 1 Book of Moon effect is sad, to say the least, but it is a new fire monster, so I guess we should try it out maybe? And guys, this is it. My favorite Volcanic build that I'm sharing with you in hopes that you will pick up your own Volcanic core. The deck is very cheap right now, and for those of you who like max rarity cards, you can foil it out so nicely and really flex them shiny cards. Since it doesn't seem likely that we will get any new Volcanic support soon, I thought we might support Volcanics ourselves as a community. If you have any cool Volcanic decks, deck suggestions, or even combos, please leave them in the comments or send them to my email, so that we may, as a community, finally give payne96 the support he was looking for. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more content. Much love. Bye.
Hello, it is a pot of greed. What do I do? Not important, I'm definitely not a Western spy. I wanted to share my family pictures with you today, comrades. Let's take a look together. This is my brother Duality. He thinks he is Italian sometimes. Other times he thinks he is me. Don't mind him. I think he's adopted. This is me at Magic Planter's garden. What's he planting, you ask? Magic, of course. That's not illegal. Moving on. Oh, and this is my cousin Royal Firestorm guards. He's definitely not guarding a volcano here, and there is definitely not a military base inside it. Moving on. Oops, this is my grandfather Avarice, and he definitely did not escape Germany. You know what, I show you enough already. Subscribe and I might show you more. Goodbye.